Good evening. We are continuing on the Daf Yomi trek through Menachos. I will try my best not to say the word pigwell tonight.
I would appreciate.
We're going to talk about salt. We're going to talk about salt, but we're sponsored for the week by Reb Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi with a profound hakar tov to Hashem and a recognition for His kindness and protection over Moshe Greenbaum and his family. May the merit of this Daf Yomi learning bring them continued and constant shmira. Bless their home with simcha, shalva, and only bisorot tovot.
Amen.
Besoiris toivis.
Amen.
That's the translation. Maskif lo Rav Huna. Second line from the bottom. Rav Huna asked the following question. We're trying to figure out which things are required and which things are not required in this korban mincha. So, right, we said that from what Rav, he said anything which is the pasuk doesn't duplicate, right? It has to say twice. If it's not duplicated, if the pasuk doesn't say twice, it's not required. So now Rav Huna asked the question, Hare melach de lo tana bekra, there's salt, right? And the pasuk doesn't repeat it. And me'akva be, but nevertheless, salt is required for the korbanos. Detanyas, we learn a brisa. Bris melach olamhu, right? This is an eternal covenant of salt. This pasuk is written by the matnos kahuna, by the gifts that are given to the kohanim in Bamidbar Perak Yud Ches. So it lists off all the things that the kohanim get, and then it says that this is a covenant of salt. What's a covenant of salt?
In Bamidbar or the book of Bamidbar?
In the book of Bamidbar, right? It's later on, but Yud Ches, it's after Pinchas, before Pinchas, somewhere towards the middle, right? So it's this just as salt is an eternal requirement for all korbanos, so too this deal that the kohanim are going to get, all these gifts are also eternal. So shetehei bris amura b'melach. So that means that this pasuk says that this deal should be sealed, right, with salt, which can never be taken away from korbanos. Right, that seems to imply that if you don't do salt on your korban, so it invalidates the korban.
Because you want flavor.
It's not for flavor, right? It's because the pasuk says so, right? So we'll discuss how much salt you put on, and
when is it applied?
So yeah, we'll see that today, right?
Okay.
Diver Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Shimon Omer Shimon says, Nemar kan bris melach olam. Who? It says that this is a eternal covenant of salt. The Nemar lahalon, and it also says in Bamidbar. Kaf, I can't see that little words. Kaf hey, kaf ches, right? It's either Bamidbar kaf hey or kaf ches because I can't see because I don't know, right? Kaf hey, good. I can't see. I don't know why my eyes are off tonight. Bris kahunas olam. It is an eternal covenant for the kohanim. Kishim she'iyavshar lekorbanos below kahuna, and that is to tell me that just like you can't have korbanos without a kohen, kach iyavshar lekorbanos below melch, you also cannot have korbanos without salt. Amar of Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, Rav Katana didon svirale. Rav, who seems to imply that salt is not required, must hold like a tana, this tana that we heard. Amar, who says lo malach kosher, that if you don't put salt on it is kosher. Right? Amar le Abaye, Abaye says, Ihachi, if that's true, lo yatzak nami. So then, if that's the case, then when it says in the Mishnah that if you didn't apply the oil, let's say lo yatzak klal, let's make that also that he didn't apply it at all. Right? So Ella, because after all, if you're going to say lo malach, our Mishnah says he doesn't put salt on, it's kosher. So then why don't we imply that our Mishnah is also saying if you don't pour oil on, it's kosher? Ella lo yatzak kohen elazar. Rather, we explained that it meant not that pouring of the oil is not required. It means that it doesn't require it to be done by a kohen. It can be poured. The oil needs to be included in the korban, but it can be done by a non-kohen. So Hanami. So here too, in the Mishnah, our Mishnah says that it doesn't require salt. Doesn't mean that it doesn't require salt at all. So lo malach kohen elazar. It means that a kohen didn't apply the salt. A non-kohen applies the salt.
Would it invalidate it?
It seems to imply our Mishnah no, right? However, the other psukim, this Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon seem to say yes, right? We have subject to machlokas. So Amar Lei, so he says v'chitala datach shazar karav legabi mizbeach. So this is Jeff's question. When is the salt applied? The salt is applied when you're going to burn something on the mizbeach. Whenever something is going to be burned on the mizbeach, so you have to give some salt to it, right? We learned
you sprinkle it, right?
On the thing that is supposed to be burned, right? We had the head of the bird, for example. We were going to put that and burn that on the mizbeach, so we had to put salt on that.
The meat, it would take away the blood or whatever sometimes.
But we're not worrying about taking away the blood so much because we're going to burn the entire thing anyway. But once you're going to whenever you're going to burn something on the mizbeach, salt must be applied. Now, if that's when you're going to apply the salt, right before you're going to burn something on the mizbeach, a non-Kohen can't stand there. Remember where we took a look at the picture of the Beis Hamikdash. Only the furthest out area of the Beis Hamikdash, the amos that are before those 3 steps that you go up, that's where the non-Kohanim can stand. Non-Kohanim can never get to the Mizbeach. So if you're going to tell me that a non-Kohen is applying the salt, how can that possibly be? They couldn't be there on the Mizbeach to apply the salt. Ve'iboy, somewhere else if you want to say, Kevan deksiva be bris, since it says it is a covenant, keman detana be kra damyo. The answer could be that it says though it's duplicated. A bris, right? We had those kenya said these circumstances. We had psukim that seemed to imply that something was required, even if it's not duplicated. So too, saying that this is an eternal covenant is also a same thing that implies that it must be that you can't. Even Rav, right, who says that you're required to say something twice, would agree that salt is required because it's not. It is It's as though it's duplicated because it says it's any covenant.
What is the function of the salt? I mean, what's the symbolism, purpose?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where the salt is. So we'll have to.
Right.
We'll see if I can find something about salt. Why salt? Okay. So velo tana bekra, but the pasuk doesn't say. It's not repeated. V'haksiv, the pasuk says v'chol korban minchascha b'melech timlach. It says all of your korbanos, all your korban minchas, you should salt it with salt. So there you see, it's duplicated. It says again. So no, that pasuk is necessary to teach me something else. So humi boile lichdetanya. That is teaching me that which we learned in the Brisa. Ilu namar korban b'melach. If the pasuk had said that I need to apply to the korban salt, shomeani afilu eitzim v'dam shenikru korban. I might have thought that I also have to apply salt when I burn wood, or I apply the blood to the to the mizbeach. Anything that's going on the onto the mizbeach needs blood. So therefore, the wood, before I put the wood on the mizbeach, I got to put some salt on it. When I throw the blood on the mizbeach, I got to put some salt on it. So Tamid Lomar, therefore the pasuk says it's a mincha. This pasuk says v'chol korban minchascha b'melech timlach. All your korban menachos have to be salted. Now, ma mincha miyuchedes. What is unique about a mincha? She'achirim bo'in chova lo. So there are other things that are brought and burned on the mizbeach as a result of you needing to bring this korban mincha. For example, you need to put the wood on the mizbeach in order to burn the mincha. Right? You can't burn it without some wood. Therefore, the wood doesn't need salt because nothing has to be brought in order to burn it. But the mincha, in order for it to be burnt, needs the wood. So therefore, the mincha is salted. So afkol shachirim bo'in chovala. So also anything that you have to have something else in order to burn it. Like for example, if you're going to apply the fats, you're going to burn the fats on the mizbeach. So therefore, also it's going to apply to it. Now, however, if you're going to say that you're only going to apply those things that are like a mincha, so ima mincha miyuchedes shemateres. So you might say, you know what another characteristic of the mincha is? That when you burn the kemitza, it permits you to consume the rest of the leftovers. So af kol shematir. So therefore, it's only going to apply to korbanos which permit something else. So avidam, I will include blood, needs to be salted, shematir, because that provides permission to consume the meat of a animal sacrifice. Tamid lomar, therefore the pasuk says, me'al minchasecha, velo me'al damecha, since the end of the pasuk concludes from on your mincha, not from on your blood. So it's an exclusionary phrase. But the Gemara is going to explain how all of these psukim really is going to clarify. So we'll go through the explanatory section of this brisa quickly because the Gemara is going to explain it anyway. You might think the entire mincha needs salt, meaning when it's in the container, I've got all of the flour and the oil and the lavona, then I got to apply salt. Tamid lomar korban. No, the pasuk says only the korban part, the part that's brought to the mizbeach, needs to be salted. Korban taun melchvein mincha kula tuna melach. You don't put salt on the entire mincha. You only put salt on the kemitza as it's being burnt on the mizbeach. Ve'inli ela kometz. So that means the kmitza. Minayin lerabos es halavona. So how do you know to include the frankincense as well? That you have to put some salt on the frankincense. Merabani es halavona. So I'm going to include the frankincense. Why? Shekein ba ima bekli echad. Because frankincense is included in the same utensil as the mincha. So just as a mincha requires salt when it's burned, the kmitza is required, so to the levona requires salt as it's burned. Minayin lerabos es halavona haba bifnei atzma, u levona haba bibazichen. What about if I've got the levona for, let's say somebody donates levona as a korban by itself? So it's not coming together with a mincha that's burned, it's just by itself. Also, what about if I have the levona that's coming as the frankincense that's part of the lechem aponim, which is burnt by itself? How do I know to add salt to that? What about v'haktores? What about I have to add salt to the incense that's burned on the inner mizbeach? Got to add salt to that because it's burned on mizbeach too. Minchas kohanim, also the korban mincha of a kohen, which has no kmitza at all. How do I know to add salt to that when it's burnt? Uminchas kohen Mashiach, also the offering that the kohen gadol brings every day. How do I need to add salt to that? Uminchas nesachim. What about the animal offerings? They have a mincha as well, and there's no kmitza for those. They're completely burnt. So how do I know to add salt to that as well? So emure chatos. What about the fats of a korban chatos? Ve'emure asham, or the fats of a korban asham. Ve'emure kodshe kodshim, or the fats of any other holy of holy offerings, like the korban shlamim that's brought with the shtei alechem on Shavuos, the 2 loaves of bread, those sheep that we had been talking about, the 2 sheep that you slaughter in order to bring the 2 loaves of bread. How do I know that also you put salt on that? They muri kachim kalim, and also the limbs that are burnt of other animal sacrifices that are kachim kalim, right? If somebody brings a korban shalom himself or korban toda, he's got to put salt on everything that he's burning on the mizbeach. Ve'evari ola, also the limbs of a korban ola. Ve'olas ha'of, also the head of the bird, the korban ola, and the body of the bird that's being burnt. Minayin, how do I know to include those? Talmud lomar. Therefore, the pasuk says, "Al kor kabar and chal takriv melech." On all of your korbanos, you shall place salt. So, therefore, when is the salt placed? As you're putting it up on the mizbeach, everything that goes to get burned on the mizbeach, you put a little salt on it. Right? That's why we have the custom, we leave salt on our table, as we said yesterday, for hamotzi, whatever to dip. Right. But even now, otherwise, you leave salt on your table, right? And that's just not a polite condiment thing.
With the salt on for the bread, could you have anything to do with the destruction of the temple as well?
It's to commemorate that your table is like a mizbeach, right? And so therefore we have salt there in order to remind us of that.
They must have had I'm thinking of the salt, the industrial salt bins.
Right.
We're going to discuss that in a moment too, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, where they kept the salt, right? I'm thinking with the nice icy weather outside like this, I am thinking about those big bags of salt and bins, absolutely. So Amar Mar, so now, let's explain, right? Let's explain this. Mar says, let's go back over this to explain the brisa. We went through it, and it quoted all these different sukkim. We're going to explain how all of these drushos work. Ainli ela kometz, right? The pasuk says in the brisa that the kmitza, right? If it says from the mincha, it needs to have salt. So that means what part of the mincha needs to be burned, the kmitza, and so therefore the kmitza needs salt. Minayin l'rabos es halavona. How are we knowing to include? Right, it's not the same order as the brisa, but how are we coming to include the frankincense? Merabani es halavona shekein ba ima bakli echad. We said, the brisa said, because it's in the same utensil container. Now, problem is v'hamart ma mincha miyuchedes she'achirim bo'in bechovala. We said, though, earlier in the brisa, that the requirement was that something else had to be burned in order to accommodate it. So therefore, also the levona needs wood in order to burn it. So why isn't it included already? So therefore, hachi kamer. Here's how you understand the brisa. Ema korban klal umincha prat. The old-fashioned klal prat uklal. Right? This we have. So it says that, klal prat. It says all the korbanos need salt. That's the klal. That's the generality. Then it says that the mincha is the korban that needs it. That's the prat. Right? So that's the detail. Now our rule of klal prat is klal prat ein beklal elo mashe beprat. The rule is that when you have a generality followed by a specific, the only things you include are things that are directly related to that specific item. So what is the only thing that's included? Mincha in, midi achrina lo. Only the korban mincha. That's the only thing that's included at that point. Now, hadar amar, then the pasuk concludes, al kol korbanecha, all of your korbanos, on all of your korbanos. That is a generality again. So what do we have? We have a generality, and then a specific mincha, and then generality, all of the korbanos. What's the rule of generality, specific, and generality? We're going to include those items which are similar to the specific, not just the specific item, not just mincha, but anything that's similar to a mincha. So therefore, it's chazru klal. It's going back and making another generation. Klal pratu klal. We have a generalization, a specific, and a generalization. Iata dan ela ke'ena prat. We're going to include anything which is similar to the individual, to the specific item. Ma prat mefurosh she'achirim boin chovala. So what is it about a mincha that we're going to compare everything to? It's going to be something that, as the Brisa said, other things are brought in service in order to accommodate this mincha. So too, af kol she'achirim boin chovala. So too, any other item that others cause something else to be brought. Achirim deboin chovala ma'inihu. What are the other things that are coming as a result of this obligation? Eitzim, wood, right? I need wood in order to burn the mincha. So to any korban which I'm going to need wood is going to any item that I'm going to burn that needs wood, or burned, I guess is the definition, right? If it's going to be burnt, meaning I need wood, so then it's included. It needs salt. Af kol eitzim. So 1 second. My nihu eitzim.
Which is not here. But when you don't, for example, it talks about over there, when there is a certain, I guess, lowest point.
Right, so what are those things? So those are eitzim. So af kol, any korban which requires eitzim, anything that also requires wood, is going to also need salt.
Which korbanos
I don't get it. I don't want to get it.
The blood is sprinkled, it's not burned, right? It's applied to the mizbeach, right? So it wouldn't require salt, right? As a for example. The wine that's poured on the mizbeach, right? It's poured down into the bowl. It's not poured into the corner. It's not poured, or the water also. It's not poured into the fire. So we had, I guess it was one opinion said that the wine is poured into the fire, but according to the opinion that, remember we said sprinkled it in, right? But according to the opinion that it's not, so therefore we see things that are applied to the mizbeach that are not burned. So those things wouldn't require salt. So ema livona. So I should include the frankincense, right? The isidam. So I should, fine. So, vaisidam deika nisachim. However, maybe I do require the blood, right? Because the blood requires oil and wine, right? They are required in order to bring the animal korban. Right, every animal korban requires a mincha, that requires the nesachim that come with it. Right, as we saw in the back of that blue chumash, that whenever you bring an animal korban, you have to bring a certain amount of flour, a certain amount of wine, a certain amount of oil. So even the blood doesn't have wood that you're required in order to bring it, but it has a requirement for you to bring the oil and the wine in order to be able to bring it. So the blood also. So you're going to should include levona va'aisidam and also bring the blood. Dikin nesachim. So nesachim bahade emurin hu da'asu. So the reason why not is because the nesachim, the oil and the wine, are not coming in order to help the blood. Those are coming in order to help you burn the fats, the emurim. So therefore, and the emurim, we already knew to put on salt because you need wood for that anyway. So therefore, blood is not included. My taima, what's the reason? Achila ushtia. It makes sense. Because why are we bringing the wine anyway? The answer is, since the mizbeach is having a feast, it's eating, it's consuming the meat, so too, it should have a drink to go with it. So therefore, achilu shtia go together. That's why you bring the wine. So I'm wondering whether salt comes into this. I don't remember salt coming in as a reason. But that's the reason why the wine, right? The achilu shtia. Adarabba. No, I'll tell you, it should go together with the blood because kapara v'simcha. Because you know what other two things go together? Getting an atonement and being happy. So therefore, the reason why you're bringing the wine is because you got an atonement for using the blood. So therefore, the happy wine should come together with the blood.
So happy wine?
The happiness of the wine makes you happy. Right. So Ella levona ba ima bekli echad. So rather, you're right. We can't say why. That's not why the levona is required to bring salt. Levona needs salt because because it comes in the same utensil as the mincha. Now, nesachim ein boim b'kli echad, but the wine and the oil that comes with the animal doesn't come in the same utensil. So therefore, it doesn't require salt. Aval eitzim, right? But wood, ki heichig de miskasher behu mincha, hachi miskasher behu kulei korbanos. So, however, the wood, right? So, right. So that just as it is a hechsher, it is a tool in order to allow you to bring a korban mincha. So too, it also helps every other korban. So therefore, all of the other korban are required with wood, so they have to be salted also. Okay, fine. That is one connection to. So that's one way of learning this connection to mincha. But I'll tell you another thing. The ema. Why don't I say mahaprat mefurash she'acherim bain chova la umateres? Maybe there's two things to the mincha, right? Number one, other things are brought in order to allow the mincha to be brought, and the other thing about it is that it permits the other part of the offering to be eaten. So afkol shacher bain chova la umateres. So it should the only things that should require salt are other things that have those two qualities. Other things that have other wood in order to burn it, and also it permits something else. So ma'inihu, what are those types of things? Levona haba bibazichin, right? Or the levona, that the frankincense, which comes in the spoons by the lechem upon him. Why? Desharya lechem, because that permits the lechem upon him to be eaten, and it's burned. So aval midi achrini lo, but none of the other korbanos are like that. If I burn the fats, burning the fats has nothing to do with permitting the meat. Throwing the blood permitted the meat. So therefore, the burning of the fats shouldn't require salt. So midi itzrich me'al minchascha velo me'al damecha mikal dahanach kuluhu also bechad tzad. So the answer is no. Since the pasuk has to say, right, that there's no obligation to put salt on the blood, because the pasuk says me'al minchasecha, that you are supposed to put salt on the mincha, not on the blood. So therefore, it implies that if the pasuk would not have specified that, we would have presumed you do put salt on the blood. Now, the blood is not burned. The blood permits something else. So what do you see? You don't need both comparisons to a mincha in order to require salt. You need it to either be a permitter or have wood that is required to burn it. So blood, which only has the fact that it's a permitter, just like the mincha, just like the komets, would need salt. So too, these other korbanos, which require wood, just like the mincha do, also require salt. So the only thing is, blood is specifically excluded, right? Because the pasuk says, me'al minchasecha, not your blood. So therefore, the blood does not get it. Amar mar. So let's go over that. Me'al minchasecha, the pasuk says, upon your mincha, velo me'al damecha, right? It doesn't, not on the blood. Right? Because otherwise I might have thought blood comes from it, so therefore it would require salt. Says the pasuk, no. Ve'ema, why do you say that it means that you need salt on your mincha, but not blood? Why don't you say me'al minchasecha velo me'al evarecha? Why don't you say the mincha requires salt, but not the limbs, right? So mistabra evarim hava leil rabuye. It makes sense. I've got to exclude one thing. I'm going to exclude either the blood or the limbs. Makes more sense to include the limbs. Why? Shekain acherim ba'in chova la. Because the wood comes as a requirement in order to burn the limbs. So, and also, it says it has a number of things that are connecting it to the mincha. Also, kamosa ishim, right? It also is similar in that it's burned in fire, like the mincha. Kamosa bachutz. It's also similar to mincha in that it's burned on the outer mizbeach. Kamosa nosar. It also is like the mincha in that if you leave it over to the morning and then you eat it, you get kares for eating nosar. Kamosa tuma. Also, it can contract impurity, tuma, just like the kamitza can. Also, kamosa me'ila. Also, using these limbs, violates a prohibition of me'ilah, of using something that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, which is the same thing by a mincha. Kamosa, I know this is a number of things that connect these limbs to the mincha. So kamosa. I was reading it wrong. It should be right. Chovala kamosa, by chovala kamosa, ishim kamosa, bechutz kamosa, noser kamosa, tuma kamosa, and meila kamosa. So adarabba. So says Chafam Beis. Adarabba. No, it's exactly the opposite. You're seeing it all wrong. Dam havolei l'rabuye. It's blood that should be included. Why? Because it's similar to the mincha in several ways. Shekain matir kamosa. It permits something else to be consumed, just like the kometz of the mincha. Nifsal b'shkias achama kamosa. It becomes invalid at nightfall. At nightfall, you can't throw the blood anymore. So to the kamitza, you can't burn it after nightfall. But the limbs, you can burn all night, right? So the answer is hanach nefishin. Yeah, but that's two things. So blood is like the mincha in two ways. But the limbs are like the mincha in so many more ways. So therefore, if you are going to include one of these two, you include the limbs. Those are going to require salt. Blood does not. Okay, so now, Amar Mar, something else that was said in the Mishnah was, Shomea ani afilu eitzim v'dam shenikru korban. I might have presumed that the wood itself and the blood require salt because they are called a korban. There are psukim that call the blood and it says, every korban you shall salt. So, man shmosle damar eitzim ikri korban. Who says that wood is called a korban? Where do you ever see such a thing? So that's Rabbi. Rabbi is the one who says that, right? Rabbi says that a person can say, I would like to bring a korban of wood. Yeah, but l'Rebbe mi boi bo'u melach. But Rabbi actually holds that you do need salt when you bring the wood. So we're looking for somebody who thinks it's a korban but says you don't need salt. But Rebbe's the one who says it's a korban, but he says you do need salt. Tanya, we learn a brisa. Korban. Do we include the word mincha? No, we're going to take that out. Korban laHashem. The pasuk says it's a korban to Hashem. So even though the pasuk does say the word mincha in there, but we're going to exclude it here because that's not our point. Melamed shemisnadvin eitzim teaches us that you can make a nadava, you can make a korban, a donation of a korban of wood. V'kama, how much is your korban if you donate wood? Shnei gezirin, 2 logs. V'chein hu omer, as it says, v'hagora los hipalnu ad korban ha'eitzim. So too, in Nehemiah, right? The people are coming back. It says they drew lots, and the drops fell on the korban of wood. So you see, they had a korban that they were bringing that was wood. Rabbi Amar, Rabbi says, eitzim korban minchahin. That wood is a korban, right? It's not just a donation, it's a korban, it's a mincha, korban mincha. Uti'unin melach, it needs salt, like any other korban melach, korban mincha. Uti'unin hagosha, and you also have to do the part where you take the wood and you touch it to the corner of the mizbeach if you're bringing it as a korban. The Amar Rava says, now, L'divrei Rabbi, according to Rabbi, eitzim te'unin kamitza. Not only do you need salt, but if it's a korban mincha, you have to do kamitza. On a log, you grind it up, right? You put it through the shredder, right? Grind it up, you put it through the tripper, right? And then you do a kamitza on this wood. V'amar Rav Papa says L'divrei Rabbi eitzim tzrichim eitzim. According to Rabbi, you need wood in order to burn the wood. Because it's a mincha, right? So if you're burning it as a mincha, you need to have a log on the fire already in order to burn this wood. So, sami mikan eitzim. So, okay, we're going to have to remove from this list wood, right? And so, because Rebbe holds that it requires salt. Ve'ela kra lemute mai. So then, what is the pasuk coming to exclude? I lemute dam. If it's coming to exclude blood, we already had another pasuk. Me al min chasecha nafka. That we already excluded from the word me al min chasecha. So the question is korban, right? We had the word korban laHashem. What was it coming to exclude? So chaf alef med aleph apik eitzim va'ayil nesachim. Take the word wood out, and we're going to put the nesachim in instead. The nesachim, the wine and the oil that come together, they do not need salting, as we said. It's poured on the mizbeach, but it's not burned. Titania, we learn in brisa. Aval hayayin vehadam veha'etzim ve'aktoras ein tunin melach. The wine and the blood and the wood. I suppose this is not going according to Rabbi, and the ketores, the incense. So they do not need salt. So now the question is, money, whose opinion is this? Rebbe, if this is Rebbe's opinion, kasha eitzim, then why would wood be listed in this list? Wood does not need salt. Wood does need salt. Rabbanan, if it's the rabbis, kasha ketoras. Then why is ketoras on the list of things that don't need salt? They said that the ketoras, the incense that's burned on the inside, does need salt. So hai tanahu. So the answer is it's another opinion. There's another opinion that does not require salt for the ketoras and does not require salt for the wood. Titania. Here we learn a brisa. Rabbi Yishmael benosh Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer. It was Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Broka, who said, Maha prat. What? Just like back to our pasuk, the generalization, the specific, the generalization. Korban, mincha, which was the specific, and then back to korbanos was the generalization. So now it's only going to include things that are similar to a mincha. Mahaprat, just like the word mincha, which is the specific, mafurash davar shemekabel tuma, it is something. What's unique about it? It can accept tuma. Ve'ola leishim, and it gets burned in fire. Ve'yeshno al mizbeach hachitzon, and it is also burned on the outer mizbeach. So too, af kol davar hamekabel. So the only things that need salt, al davar mekabel tuma, things that can accept tuma. Ve'ola leishim, and it goes on the fire. Ve'yeshno al mizbeach hachitzon, it's burned on the outer mizbeach. So you know what gets excluded if that's your definition. Yotzu eitzim is going to exclude the wood. Why? Shem mekabel tuma. Wood cannot accept tuma. It's not a completed product or utensil or a food. It's not a utensil or a food that can accept tuma. Yotzu dam, blood, v'yayin, and the wine, she'ein olam lishim, because they don't get burned on the mizbeach. Yotza ketores, and the incense, she'ein al mizbeach chitzon, doesn't get brought on the outer mizbeach, gets brought on the inner mizbeach. So none of those things require salt, according to Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Ella, taima demiata kro ledam. So 1 second. I thought the reason why blood doesn't get an application was because the pasuk specifically said on your mincha, not on the blood. So halav hachi. So the answer is, if it wasn't for that, havamina dam li boy melech. I might have thought that the blood, right? The only reason I need a pasuk is I would have thought that blood does require salt. Kaven de malicha nafik li mitoras dam. So because 1 second, I'm going to take that back. So elataima demate kro ledam. That is okay. So back to the point, right? That the reason why we said that blood does not need salt is because the pasuk excludes it, right? Either from the two sources, either from the pasuk me'al min chasecha, but according to Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, he says it comes from this. It's not similar. So it's not brought on the. It's not burned on the mizbeach. But we have psukim. So the reason why blood doesn't get salt is from psukim. Why should that be? Halav hachi. Even if you didn't have the pasuk, you know how I would know that you don't add salt to the blood, because havamina damli boy melach. I might have thought that you do need salt for the blood, but kevad demlicha nafak lemi toras dam. If I put salt in the blood, it's going to ruin the blood. It's not blood anymore once it's salted. How do I know that? Damar Ziri. Now we get into some Ziri stuff. Amar Reb Chanina. Reb Ziri says in the name of Rabbi Chanina, Dam shebishlu. If you cook the blood, so eno over alav, you're not in violation of the prohibition of eating blood. It's not blood anymore once it's cooked, according to Ziri. Right? We don't hold that way. Right? So, however, that's Ziri's opinion. For Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda says, Amar Ziri, he says in the name of Ziri, Dam shemalchu eno over alav. If you put salt in the blood, that also removes, it's not considered blood anymore, right? The Rav Yehuda didei Amar, and Rav Yehuda himself said, Eivarim shetzal on v'helon ein bahem mishum reach nichoach. He has another rule, which is that if you take the limbs and you roast them, you can't then burn them on the mizbeach because they lose the quality of reach nichoach, the pleasant smell that they're supposed to have when they're being barbecued on the mizbeach. Right, it's already roasted, so now you just have burning meat on the mizbeach, not roasted. He said once you've already roasted them, you can't put them on the mizbeach because it needs reach nichoach. Okay.
They use the kitabon for the oven, right? For the roasting.
Sorry,
How did they roast it?
they didn't roast it. They're saying they're not supposed to. Let's say somebody decided, you know what, I'll take it and I'll barbecue it over here before I put it on the mizbeach. Can't put it on the mizbeach. Now, ma'odatema, what would you have thought? Mishtaba mashahu lemitzvah bialma. So the answer is maybe all you got to do is put a drop of salt. right? Maybe I don't need to put that much salt that it ruins it from being blood. Just put a little drop of salt in there. A little drop of salt will be sufficient in order to accomplish the mitzvah. Therefore, kamashmal, and the answer is no. Can't even put a little drop of salt you don't put a little drop of salt on the blood at all. So, sounds like how much salt do you put on? We're going to see in greater detail how much salt later on. But you might have even thought a little drop. No, don't put any on. Okay, Gufa. Let's go back and talk about Zira in a minute. Ziri again.
It's cool. Or your higher level understanding.
Amar Ziri. Ziri says, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Chanina. Dam shebishlu eino over alav. Right? If you have blood that was cooked, you're not in violation of consuming blood. Yosef Rava v'ka'amar le'losh ma'isa. Rava was coming and teaching this. He was sitting and he was teaching this over. Eisvei Abaye. Abaye asked him the following question. Hakafas adam ve'achlo. Let's say he warms up the blood in some kind of, I guess, how warm he makes it, but I guess it becomes somewhat hardened, right? He hardens it.
Right.
Ve'achlu, and then he consumes it. Oh, shehimcha es hachelev ve'gam-o, or ugamo chayav. So, or, let's say,
is also going on the top, no?
right, I guess, I don't know what he does to he's burning it or something. What is it? He's liquefying it. Yeah. He liquefies the fat, right? And then he swallows it, he drinks it. So he's chayav kares because of eating blood or the fats in those circumstances.
The fat
Gets liquidy and drips off, right? Yeah, so that's true, right? You can liquefy it that way. So, lo kasha. So one sec's not a contradiction because kan shehakafa be'or, kan shehakafa bechama. The answer is it depends on how you hardened the blood, right? How hardened you made it. If you hardened it, you put it on fire and therefore hardened the blood. So then that's where Ziri says it's not blood anymore. But if it hardened in the sun, so then it can liquefy. You stir it up again, you can liquefy it again, and then it's still blood. So therefore, if it hardens in the sun, it's still blood. So, be'or lo hadar, if you do it in fire, it's not coming back. It's not blood anymore. Bechama, but if you do it in the sun, hadar, but it's going to come back. Now, still, bechama nami lema, but even in the sun, let's say, remember this old thing, hol ve'idchi idchi. We had a rule by korbanos. Once it's invalid for a moment, it can never become valid again. So therefore, if it was hardened for a moment, who cares that it can become blood again in the future? When it was hard, it couldn't be used as a korban. As Rabbi had asked me, Rabbi Mani asked Rabbi Yochanan, Dam shekarash ve'achlo. Let's say you have blood that congealed and you ate it, right? You didn't drink it, you ate it.
You mean become like gelatin?
Yeah, right? That's what happens with blood. It has proteins in it that help them, I guess some proteins. Coagulate is the word.
Yeah.
Right? Mahu, what is the rule? Amar lei, so he says, Hoil v'nidcha yidcha, since it was congealed for a time, it is now unable to be brought. So ishtek, so he didn't have an answer to that question. That's a great point, right? If it was hardened for a moment, it should be invalid. So Amar lei, so he said back to him, Dilma vadai kan bechatos achitonos, kan bechatos apnimios. Maybe it makes a difference whether you're talking about the blood of an inner chatos or blood of an outer chatos. Because the blood of the inner chatos needs to be liquid at all times, because it needs to be sprinkled. The blood of the outer chatos, even if it congeals, the pasuk just says you need to take it and place it on the mizbeach. So if he just takes the chunk of it and wipes it on the corner of the mizbeach, that could be sufficient. So therefore, it's always acceptable. It never left its acceptability. So Amar, he said, Ad karasan milsa de Amar Rav Chisda. You've just reminded me of something that Rav Chisda said. Dam shekarish bechatos. If you have blood that congeals by a korban chatos ve'achlo and you eat it, you're chayav. Why? Because v'lakach v'nasan Amar Rachmana. The Torah says you have to take it and place it. Therefore, even if it is congealed, right, it's still blood. And therefore, you can still be chayiv if you eat it. V'hai bar lakicha unasinahu. This blood that's congealed can be taken and it can be placed on the mizbeach. But bechatos hapnimios v'achlo. But the inner chatos. So if you eat that which is congealed, the blood that congealed there, you're pater, you're exempt. Why? Because the pasuk says v'taval v'hizah. You dip and you sprinkle. Dipping and sprinkling needs to be liquid. Okay, so this is not something that you can dip your finger in and sprinkle. So therefore, that congealed blood is not blood. The Rava Didei Amar, then Rava himself said, Afilu bechatos pnimios. No, even the chatos, the inner chatos, ve'achlo, if it congeals and you eat it, you're chayiv. Why? Ho kenegdo roi bechatos chitonios. Because once you have the rule that says that congealed blood on the outside mizbeach is still blood, then you have to have the rule that is consistent, right? It can be consistent, even though you can't use congealed blood on the inside korbanos. Still, that's the rule by blood. It's not considered to be invalid because it is eligible if it were in a korban on the outside. Amar Rav Papa takes it a step further and he says, Hilkach, therefore, dam chamor shekarash. You have donkey's blood that congeals, right? Ve'achlo, and you eat that, you're chayav for eating blood. Why? Because if that were kosher blood of a korban, it would still be blood. So it doesn't have to be a kosher korban's blood. It just needs to be, this is the definition of what blood is. Amar of Gidol, Amar Ze'iri. Rav Gidol then says in the name of Ze'iri, since we're on the topic of Ze'iri statements, Dam, when it comes to blood, Bein Lach, Bein Yavesh, whether it's liquid blood or dried blood, Chotzetz, it can make a chatzitza on your skin. It can make stop it from being kosher in the mikvah. Meisvei, but we have a question on that. Hadam v'adio v'hadvash v'hachalav yaveshin. If I've got blood, ink, I've got honey, or I've got milk, if they're dry, chotzitzin, they can create a chatzitza, a separation. That's why you gotta go wash, take a shower before you go to the mikvah. Lachin, but if they're liquid, einan chotzitzin, they don't create a chatzitza. So lo kasha. So it's not a contradiction. Ha de sorich, ha de lo sorich. Depends if we're talking about if it is sticky or if it's not sticky, right? If it's not sticky, if it's dried or congealed and it's not sticky, so then it's not going to be a chatzitza. But if it is sticky, then it is chatzitza. Okay. Timlach. So now there is one pasuk that we were talking about. The pasuk says, "B'melach timlach." You should salt it in salt. So that's a weird language. You shall salt it and salt. What else are you going to salt it with, right? So
you can use table salt. You can use kosher salt. You can use.
Okay, so you're saying that it tells you the quality of the salt. So that's what the Gemara is going to say. So Timach Yuda's always on the ball with these things, right? Just when you think he's not listening, right? He's like, oh, that's fine.
Remember, I'm good ears.
Oh yeah.
So Timlach Lemay Elsa. What is the point of saying you shall salt it? Just say you should have salt on it. So L'chedetanya is we're going to brisa. B'melach with salt, yachol tevunehu. You might think that you have to tevunehu. We don't know what that means yet. So hang on, we're going to see. Talmud Lomar timlach. It says no, just salt it. Whatever tivunehu is, that's going to tell us the quantity of salt you need to put on. You might think you need to do tivunehu with the salt. No, just says regular salt. Timlach, if it says that you should salt it as the verb, yachol b'mei melach, you might think you could use brine, salt water. So Talmud Lomar b'melach, therefore it says, as Yehuda says, it has to be with salt. V'lo tashbis melach, it says that you shall not rest the salt, right? You should not have arrested salt. What does that mean, right? That tells you that melach, so melach, so lo tashbis, so have melach she'ena shoveses. You need to have salt that is never rested. How does that work? Vezozu melach. Which vezozu? What is that salt? Melach sdomis. It's the Sodom salt, sea salt, because it is constantly being churned up by the sea and left on the shore. And then it's a salt that's constantly in production.
We should also know to be healthier salt.
Yeah, sea salt, right? So that's your sea salt. So that is the salt, kind of salt. Let's say you don't have sea salt, right? How do you know that you can use shemevi melach isteroknis? How do you know that I can bring isteroknis salt, which is kind of a coarse salt? Right, that it is minerals, right? Mineral salt, right? It says it's mined salt that comes from salt mines, not from sea salt. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says takriv kol shehu takriv mikol makom, right? Bring any amount, right? And you can bring whether it's Sodom salt or istrakonis salt, and also. You can even bring it mikol makom from outside of Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't even have to be Israeli salt. It can come from outside of Israel.
Is Sodom salt necessarily from the Dead Sea, or is it?
So it seems like it doesn't have to be. Right, from here it seems like it doesn't have to be. Right, it could be sea salt from anywhere.
And Yisroel seems to be like
Our mined regular table salt that we have, right? Our salt comes from salt mines.
Where does the kosher salt come from, though?
It's large granuled mined salt, right? So ironically, you don't use kosher salt. It's kosher salt, ideally, right? So now, not only that, afilu b'Shabbos, right? You even have to salt it on Shabbos, despite the fact that salting may be a problem of tanning if you put excessive salt onto meat, right? It could be a tanning problem, and nevertheless, it's because why? Because part of the korban. So it's part of the korban. You can do it. Takriv afilu betuma, and you can bring it since it's part of the korban, even if it's tummy, you still apply the salt. Okay. My tivunehu. Now we said you might have thought that you're supposed to put salt tivunehu. No, just salt it. So what is tivunehu that you don't have to do? Samar Rabba Bar Ula says hachi kamar. This is what it means. Yochol yisbonenu keteven batit. You might think that you need to put a tremendous amount on it, like you would put straw to make bricks, right? You would have to make a tremendous amount. So Abaye says that wouldn't be the right verb. If that was it, you should say yisbonenu, right? It should say yisbonenu, not the word that it uses, which is tivunehu, right? Tivunehu. There's a hey in there, right? Not yisbonenu, which means to mush it up or to knead it up. So,
tivunehu emanates from the root word bone, which connotes building.
No, that's the next one. This is before, right? This Elamar Batni. So Elamar Abai says, Yachol Yasiru Kibinyan. You might need to put enough salt on it that it's like stacked up like a building. So Amar Le Rava. So Rava says, Ihachi Yevonenu. Right? It should say Yevonenu, which is binyan, from the word binyan, as Yehuda read. El Amar Rava. Rava says, Yachol Tivunehu. You might think that you need to says Tivunehu. My Tivunehu. So what does that mean, Tivunehu? Right? Rava says means Tivunehu. Right? So what does that mean? So he says, Amar Rav Shesher. Rav Shesher says, Yachol Yitembo Tam Kebina. Right? You only need a taste of it. Very little salt. This is the opposite of the other two opinions where I can't put a lot on. No. You might think you need to have to just put like bina, meaning an understanding. You have to just taste like a little drop of salt, right? So Tamad Lomar, Timloch, no, you have to really salt it, right? You have to thoroughly salt it. Keitzad hu oseh. So how does this work? What do you do? Right? So I'll answer all Jeff's questions tonight. You asked the right question. So what do you do? So you will know everything you need to know about salting your korbanos tonight. Maybe ha'aver, you take the limb, v'nosein alav melach, you put salt on one side, v'chozer v'hofcho, you turn it over on the other side, v'nosein alav melach, and you put salt on the other side, uma'alehu, and then you put it in the fire. Amar Abaye v'chein lekedera. So and Abaye says, so too, right? If somebody wants to cook in a pot, right? So you want to remove the blood from it, right? If you want to be able to kosher your meat, this is the same procedure as koshering meat, right? If you want to remove the blood from your meat, you spread salt all over it on one side, turn it over, and you need to put and cover it with salt on the other side.
And you don't use water to wash out the salt.
Not until the end, right? You leave it on there for a while until it absorbs and soaks the blood out. Right?
Do we understand from this how much salt?
It has to be. It seems like the amount we use is coverage. Right? A layer.
Why is that happening? Because you didn't give him a chance.
Right? A nice layer or a nice coating of salt.
The Talmud
So it seems.
wasn't
Taner Rabbanan, Chaf Aleph Mo Beis. Taner Rabbanan is Rabbi's one. Melech shal gabe ha'aver moalin lo. Right? He says if you've got salt which is on the limb of the korban, so then it's like part of the limb. And so if you use that salt for your own personal use, it's considered me'ilah. You're using a korban illegally, right? She'afal gav, she'al gabe hakeves, v'sherosho shemizbeach ein mo'olim. But the salt which was on the ramp and on the top of the mizbeach, so that's not me'ilah. It's not part of the korban yet. It's only part of the korban once you sprinkle it. V'amar Rav Masna says, "My kar'a." What is the pasuk that indicates that? V'hikravtim lifnei Hashem, that you shall bring it close before Hashem. V'yishlichu hakohanim aleihem melech, you throw the kohanim should put salt upon it. Ve'elu osam olah al Hashem, and then once the kohanim put salt on it, it becomes an olah to Hashem. It's not an olah to Hashem. The salt that's sitting there is not an olah, so it can be used. The salt that's sitting there, ready to be used, can be used for personal use, as we will see in a bit. Tanan Hasim, we learned in the Mishnah over there. Over there is Shkalim, the Mishnah in Shkalim. Al hamelach v'al ha'etzim sheyehu kohanim no'os behen. The Beis Din made various conditions upon various items in the Beis Hamikdash for special use. They made a condition that the salt, when they would buy the salt and the wood, the kohanim are allowed to get benefit from it. Right? It's not considered to be hektish yet until it's about to be used. And that's what we just said, by the salt. So the kohanim can take the salt that's sitting there ready to be used and use it for their own pasa, for their own personal use. Amar Shmuel, lo shanu ella lekorbanom. Shmuel says that's only if they want to use it for their korban. Aval la'achila, but if they just want to eat, lo, they can't use it for that. Now, Kasalka daitach, my lekorbanom. Let's think, what do we mean when we say for their korbanos? Limloch korbanom lachil. We mean that they have to eat the meat. They have to eat their korban. So this means that they can salt their lunch, their korban lunch, with the salt. Lachilas kodshim, right? So hashta lemloch oros kodshim yahavina, lachilas kodshim lo yahavinon. So he says, but that doesn't make sense. Because of course they could use it for that. We allow the kohanim to take the salt and use it in order to salt the skins, the hides that they have from the animals. Right? And as soon as the animals' hides get stripped, we don't want them to go bad. So we allow the kohanim to take the salt that was there in the Beis Hamikdash and use it to salt the hides so that it would be salted right away, and then they could take it home and finish tanning it later. Titania's we're in a brisa. Nimtes ata omer b'shlosha mekomos hamelach nesuna. There were 3 locations that they stored the salt. Belishkas hamelach, they had a chamber of salt. That was a big storehouse, a room that was a big storehouse. Obviously, they needed a lot of salt, so they had a storehouse for the salt. Val gave yakevesh, they would put a pile of it on the ramp for easy access because they had to do the limbs. Uberoshel shem mizbeach, and then they had another pile on the top of the mizbeach. So we have those are the locations. As I said, these bins, right, where they kept the salt. Right, they had the salt there. Belishkas hamelach, they would. Why did they have it in the room for salt? Shesham molichin oros. Kodshim al gabe shalkam molichin oros. Oros kodshim. That is where they would salt the skins of the korbanos. The kohanim could go in there, take the salt there, and then they could put salt on the skins and leave them there. Al gabe hakevesh, they had it on the ramp. Shesham malichim es ha'ivarim, that's where they would do the salting for all the limbs of the korbanos. Berosh shel shem mizbeach, on the top of the mizbeach, shesham malichin hakometz, that's for the kmitza of the mincha, they would put the salt on it there. V'alavon, the frankincense, v'haktores, and the incense. Now, why the incense? Why didn't they do the incense on the ramp? It's closer, right? Because you're not burning it on top of the big mizbeach, you're burning it inside. The answer is because it was pretty bloody on the ramp, right? All the salt was there were all these limbs for the animals. That's where you're doing the salting for that. So that's a messy salt area, a lot of blood. So therefore they took the ketores, which wanted to be clean, and they brought it up to the top of the mizbeach, where they put the salt up there. Uminchas kohanim, minchas komishiach, the mincha of the kohanim, right? Uminchas nesachim, the mincha of the animals, which is completely burnt also. The olas ha'of, the bird offering, right? The olah of the bird. Wait a second, is there blood there? The answer is yeah, but not much. Remember, we had to squeeze some blood out in order to get some blood there. Elamai lekorbanom. So what does it mean when we say for their korban? Of course, they could use it to eat their korbanos, because they could even use it for the skins of their korbanos. So what do we mean by they can use it for their korban? La'achilas korbanom. So that means to eat their korbanos, right? That's for their korban. For their korban means to eat their korbanos. And umay la'achila, what does eating mean? That's achila dechulin. That means eating their regular lunch. They were even allowed to eat their regular lunch. It's not just that they could salt their korbanos and they could eat their korbanos. It means that they were using it to eat their korban. And even if they had chulin, why did they have chulin there? So chulin, pshita. So one second. Why are we talking about chulin? Right? Obviously, you can't use the salt for that. My boasim. How can you bring chulin, non-sanctified material, can't even be brought into the Beis Hamikdash? So if they brought a bologna sandwich, they can't put salt on that.
It's very full, it's very salty.
So the answer is Afa Gav de Amar Mar, even though it said Yochlu Sheyochlu Ima Chulin Utruma Kadesh Te Nechelas Ala Sova. The answer is the Kohanim were allowed to add ingredients. Remember, they were allowed to make the meat of the korbanos any way they wanted, so that they would be consuming it while they were not starving or hungry, right? They were consuming, so they were allowed to add, right? They could bring vegetables in order to be able to put lettuce on the sandwich, right? So they could do all of that. So that's fine. So afilu hachi, so that's even still, right? We would melach dekachim lo yavinu lahu. So even though they were allowed to do that, they were told not to use this salt, right? This says that the salt for chulin they weren't allowed to do. Right? That's what Shmuel is saying, that they were only allowed to use it for their korbanos, to eat their korbanos, but not for their achila, for eating chulin. So they weren't allowed to do that. Okay, so now, Ditanyas, we're in a brisa. Yochel ha'omer harei alai mincha. You might think, somebody says, I would like to bring korban mincha. Yavi melach mitoch beso.
Pastor Amar Le Ravina Le Ravashi.
Oh, did I skip that? I probably did. Yes, I did. Sorry. Amar Le Ravina Ravashi. Ravina says Ravashi. I do that sometimes. Ravina says Ravashi. I slide my finger down while I'm looking up. Hani hachinami mistabra. That makes sense. Right? That what they're allowed to use the salt for, what they're not allowed to use the salt for. Because the Isaac Hadaitach, Maile Korbanam, if you thought, what is the basic explanation that the Kohanim could use the salt for their Limloach Tama Da'asni Bastin. So salting their actual korban. So what? The only reason they're allowed to do that is because Bastin gave them permission. Haloisni Bastin lo. But if they would not have had a condition of Bastin, they wouldn't be allowed to salt their korbanos. Why would that be? Hashali Yisrael yavinon, lekonim lo yavinon. Look, what's the salt there for? It's to salt sacrifices. So if you could salt a regular Jewish person's sacrifice, why would the Kohanim not be allowed to use it? So why do you need special condition? Obviously, the Kohanim could use that salt. So therefore, this must be a condition that allows the Kohanim to actually eat the meat that they are going from their korbanos. The times winner brisa. Yachol, I might have thought, ha'omer harei alai mincha. Somebody says, I'm going to bring a mincha. Yavi melech mitoch beso. He should bring his own salt. He has to bring his own flour. He has to bring his own oil. Bring your own salt. Kederach shemevi levona, just like you have to bring your own frankincense, mitoch beso, from your house. Vedinu. Logically speaking, Nemar hevi mincha vehevi melech. It says that you shall bring the mincha and you shall bring the salt. V'nemar hevi mincha vehevi levona. It says also you should bring the mincha and you should bring the frankincense. Ma levona mitoch beso. Just like the frankincense comes from your own house, you provide your own frankincense. Af melech mitoch beso. So too the salt should come from your own house. O kolech l'derech zu. Or look at it the other way. Nemar hevi mincha vehevi melech. It says you should bring the mincha and bring salt. V'nemar hevi mincha vehevi eitzim. Then it says you should bring the mincha and you should bring wood. Ma eitzem mishal tzibor. Where does the wood come from? The wood comes from the community funds, right? You don't bring your own wood with your korban. Af melech mishal tzibor. So too the salt, maybe it comes from the community funds. So nira lemidoma. Let's figure out which is salt more similar to the frankincense, which you have to bring from home, or from the wood, which comes from the community. Let's take the thing which is brought by all sacrifices and compare it to the thing that's brought by all sacrifices. Don't use frankincense. Frankincense that frankincense is not by all the sacrifice, only by korban mincha. Or look at it the other way. Let's say that it should be the frankincense because that comes in the same utensil as the korban mincha. So that should be the same, but the wood is not. The wood doesn't come in the same utensil as the korban mincha. So Tamalomar, therefore the pasuk spells it out. Bris melach olamhu, right? It is a covenant of salt forever. And then later on it says, Me'es b'nei Yisrael, it comes from the Jewish people. Bris olam, as a eternal covenant. Ma'alahala mishal tzibor, just like it comes from b'nei Yisrael, is a covenant for all. So it's a covenant for all time. Afkan mishal tzibor, so too the salt comes from the community funds. It's a good place for us to stop.
Right?
Yes.
Mordechai.
We will try to push off this proof that the salt comes from community funds tomorrow. But we'll stop here.
Wow, beautiful.